Hi there. We get a fair amount of questions on how to plan for polyaxial screw insertion, as well as determining what sizes of polyaxial screws you're going to use in any particular surgery. So the purpose of this quick little video tutorial is to show you how to use Horos if you're using a Mac in order to plan for polyaxial screw placement when all you have is an MRI. Now, ideally, you would have a CT scan whenever you're going to put implants in the spine. It's best for using multiplanar reconstruction in order to get the exact plane that you want to insert, and also can be extremely helpful for post-image processing where you can do 3D reconstructions and surface renderings of the vertebral column. This can be super helpful in building confidence in the correct placement of these screws. But for today, we're going to focus on an MRI if that's all you have, and that's the case for this particular patient. This is a 5-year-old pug who has a diagnosis of a subarachnoid diverticula up here at T12, T13. And so what we're going to do is plan for stabilization. Now, whether or not you stabilize subarachnoid diverticulas, that's another conversation, but in this case, this is what the surgeon wants to do. So I'm going to take you through the process that I would use for planning for this. One other point to keep in mind is that we're going to be planning this screw at T11. And so when we're placing pedicle screws in the thoracic spine, it's significantly more difficult than in the lumbar spine, where we have a lot more avenues of approach, including the pedicle and the body. So for this case, it's going to be the T11 pedicle, which is going to be very similar in planning to pretty much any thoracic vertebrae, although they change slightly in their conformation. So the first thing I'm going to do is I bring up my T2 sagittals. I've got my T12, T13 lesion here, and then I've got my T2 transverse images here. Again, this is Horos. The main thing we're going to be using here is this toolbar on the top. I've got my T2 transverse image through approximately where I think the screw is going to go. So ideally it's where the rib head is going to meet the transverse process, and that's where the pedicle is, right here. And on this side it's right here. So I'm going to go up to the toolbar, and I'm going to select the length tool. I'm going to come down to my pedicle. I'm going to draw a line from cortical bone to cortical bone, and that's going to give me an approximate, because this isn't CT, measurement of that pedicle width. I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. So we've got 2.8 on one side and 2.8 on the other side. Then we're going to take our cursor point and we're going to place it where we would insert the screw. Kind of come down that pedicle to the middle of the width of the pedicle. So we've got 9.4. And in this particular case, we're going to be planning monocortical screws at least at T11 right here, because we have these structures ventral to the spine that tend to be filled with fluid, and we don't want to puncture them. So monocortical placement, I'm going to come over to the other side approximately where the lamina comes down and meets the transverse process. I'm going to draw another line, and I'm going to get a length of about 1 centimeter. So from this, I'd probably end up using 2.2 millimeter diameter screws, and my length is probably going to be around 1 centimeter. Now the other measurements I kind of find beneficial are the point of insertion from midline. So if I pick midline and draw a straight line out perpendicular to the longitudinal axis of the spine, I come to where approximately where that insertion would be. So I can use calipers to measure outward from midline, and I could find that point of insertion on the transverse process. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Approximately there. It's going to be 6.9 and 6.4 millimeters from midline. Then the next measurement I'm going to take is my angle of drilling, or angle of insertion of the screws. So these screws are going to be angled convergently. So I want to pick a point on midline. I'm going to come down, my second point, click, and then my third point off that angle, and then I can adjust this until I'm parallel to that line. So I have an angle of approximately 20 degrees on the left. I can take this and I can move it over, And I can do the same thing on midline, 1 point, 2 point, and my third point. Adjust that to the midline, and then I can adjust this angle to where that projection is. And now I've got an angle of about 18 degrees. So we're looking at about 20 degrees angulation for each screw. Okay. Now I'm just going to kind of clean everything up so I can see my measurements, put them where they're easy to visualize. I tend to write all these down on a piece of paper because sometimes these can be difficult to see when they're printed out. Whether or not you have your computer in the OR or you like to print out your images and kind of tape them to the wall behind you, obviously whatever works best for you. Now another measurement that might be helpful is what point of the lamina or what point of the transverse process are you drilling? And to find that out, we'll go up here to our sagittal image, and we look right here. We can see the spinous process of T11 where it comes down to meet the lamina. And that's a good reference mark because we can, again, take calipers and we can measure back to where that intersection is of the transverse image. And so that's about right there. So again, I'm going to go get my length tool. I'm going to put that on here. I'm going to measure back to that approximate level. We'll check that, click down here, and it looks like we're about 3.8 millimeters from the front edge of the transverse process to the point where we would insert our screw in the pedicle. Now again, these are approximate measurements because it is MR, but it gives you a general idea and can help improve your confidence when you're placing these screws. Now I like to do screenshots, and then I take these screenshots and I paste them into a Word document. It just works really fast for me. And then I can tape those up to the OR wall, and then I can reference them during surgery. But one of the things you'll find out with Horos is if you do a screenshot on a Mac, which is Shift Command 4, as soon as you hit the command button, your measurements are going to disappear. Your lines will still be there, but your measurements will disappear. So here I'm going to hit Shift, Command, and they go away. Now if I hit the 4 button, I can get my cursor up. So Shift, Command, 4. So here's my cursor to make my screenshot, but that doesn't do me a lot of good if all those measurements are gone. So there is a workaround to this. I'm going to show you how to do it. And it can be a bit fiddly, but hopefully this will help you get around the situation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to my windows. And I'm going to click on 4 windows now. So now what I've done is I've selected 4 windows. So I have 4 different panes here. And what I'm going to do is go find a scan that's not related to these two. So I'm going to go down my sequences here, and I find here's a T1 axial from L2, L3, and I'm going to drag this, and I'm just going to set it in place, but I'm not going to click on it. Now you'll see that just by placing it in the field, it has a red square around it, meaning it's an active window. Now without clicking on the screen, on the area of the screen where I want to take the screenshot, I'm going to hit Shift, Command. Notice my measurements are still active on that other view. And then I'm going to hit 4, and that hand is going to turn to a cursor. Now I can take my screenshot, I can drag it over to where I want to do my screenshot, and then I can click and drag and get my screenshot. And my measurements are preserved. So that's just a little tip to get around the annoying little measurement disappearing feature of Horos. Again, this is just a quick little tutorial to tell you how I plan MRI, polyaxial screws off an MRI. If you have any other options, I'm sure those work out great. This is just what I use. I get this question quite a bit. And I hope you find this helpful. We'll have more videos to help you out in your planning of implants.